has technology, Fern, has technology made advertising boring?
Yes, this is an interesting question, to which obviously with my background, you won't be surprised to hear my answer would obviously be no. There are lots of things that have made advertising boring. And it's actually the first thought that came to mind was that, what's that phrase, a bad workman blames his tools. The things that tend to make advertising boring in my experience are, first of all, fear of doing something new, doing something that hasn't been done before. That will tend to make things boring. The second thing will be a lack of insight, saying things that are not interesting because you haven't understood your consumer well enough, or what they need, or where they are in the world. Another thing that makes advertising boring is norming, things beginning to all look the same and look very similar. And I think to say that it's technology that has done this is to deny responsibility by the industry of using the technology to answer those problems. We've got more opportunities to allay fears of doing something new than we've ever had before. We can talk to customers at a great scale. We can really confirm the model. We can test and test and test again. And that doesn't need to make something boring. It just needs to be listening to people and making sure. We have a phrase in the company of set out without fear. And that's the idea, is that we use data and technology to help companies do new things. I think we also have more opportunities than ever before just to understand and do much more large scale insight journeys to understand our customers, talk to them at scale, talk to them about new things and more often, to give us insight. If we use that badly, I can understand that it might lead to too much data. But if you analyze it and you take the time to really listen to what they're saying, you'll probably do something very not boring. And then ultimately, when we think about norming, again, that is potentially a function of us using the technology poorly, not to question the data set that we're taking from, not to provide enough analysis and focus when we're looking at imagery, for example, to try to think about new production techniques. We've got more ways to use footage, video, imagery than we've ever had before. It's very lazy not to do that. I think there's more ways to bring stories to life than we've ever had before. There's more channels, there's more places, there's more opportunities, and there's more things for the audience to do when they've seen your work than ever before. They can work with it in you, as I'm sure some of the other panelists are going to talk about, how audiences can respond and discuss and use and connect with you is more interesting than ever before. So there's no reason why technology should make advertising boring. I think making things boring comes from a different source, is what I would say.
Ooh. So it's not tech what done it. It's about,
and it's also technology is a very broad. I mean, we haven't blamed technology before. It's just, I think people are referring to some sort of some of the more large scale kind of automated techniques for making advertising that people are nervous of. And the truth is, that's the pursuit of efficiency over effectiveness. That's the pursuit of using technology to remove innovative and creative suggestions from the process. And I don't think that that's required.
So I'm going to kick off the lightning round, if I may, with a quick question, then I will come to you speakers. How does this relate to human media? How does what you've just talked through, which made incredible sense, thank you, how does that relate back to enabling, empowering human media?
Well, for example, it is easier than ever to find the customers in our customer base who can be both influential and truly passionate about the subjects we're talking about.
Okay.
So from the point of view of whether technology is making something boring or not, it's the failure to use that to identify your most passionate customers, for example, and to provide ways for them to connect with others and to connect with you at the same time, to really create new messages and new things. It should lead to a real enlivening of the content of advertising, because you're opening up the way that brands are discussed to a much broader set of people. If you look at the brands who are really getting involved in fandom well, you see that they're constantly refreshing their brand imagery, constantly defying the norm. And that's because they're really using those fans, community members, sort of influencers, but I'm using that with a sort of small I, influential voices, and connecting them to people that they find really interesting in the world as well, other sort of artists, cultural influencers as well, and therefore creating much broader set of voices in advertising than we've ever had before. And I think that that's a huge opportunity.
That's great, Fern. Excellent. Panel. I'm going to start with you, Olivia. You're first up on my screen there. Thoughts, reaction to Fern's comments?
Very interesting, thank you. I embrace technology. Yes, totally agree with everything you said. I think I look at it from the flip side of the coin, in the sense of what are we as humans doing to develop ourselves in order to cope with the rate of technology and the rate of how it's moving. And I saw something really interesting the other day, which is AQ. So like we have EQ, IQ, SQ, our ability to, our adaptability, so our ability to remain curious, keep investigating, keep finding new stuff. AQ, yeah, adaptability
like it.
Which is really interesting. You know, brands are needing to have to work a lot harder and a lot smarter to keep consumers and their target audience interested and curious in order to keep on generating that social media activity and that social content from a UGC and ambassador perspective. So
that's great.
Technology is key, but developing ourselves as humans to enable us to take that technology on at the pace that it's moving at, I think is a really interesting area.
That's brilliant. Alex, your thoughts?
I think if I look back to when I was young, sometimes in the traditional TV advertising space, the adverts were the most interesting thing that was on. There was not a lot of choice, and some of that choice was relatively boring. That is no longer the case. I now have a million ways to entertain myself. And if advertising doesn't move forward, it's not that technology's made advertising boring, it's that it's made everything else more interesting. Yeah. And you notice those adverts standing out in that noise a little bit more. There are ways to advertise that don't feel like you're being advertised to quite so explicitly, that help to sort of break through that and meld into the world that is the one that's capturing your attention. And that, to me, is how we can continue to leverage technology to avoid advertising being dull.
That's great, Alex. Thank you. Andy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I broadly agree with Fern. I don't think we should be blaming technology. Technology is there for us to use in good ways or bad ways. I guess there is a challenge at the moment that everything feels so optimized. We can optimize things like never before. That doesn't necessarily encourage risk taking. I think that's what we're facing at the moment. In a way, algorithms have been curating content for a long while now, but now algorithms have the potential to actually create the content, not just curate it. I also think it's interesting, a lot of the adverts people seem to talk about these days are out of home. They're the non-digital things. You know, it's the British Airways advert, the Coca-Cola out of home adverts. Those are the ones that seem to be grabbing people's attentions rather than the digital